Yeah.
Okay. My study is about the effects of harmonic and inharmonic sounds on roughness perception. Um, how we sense the world is investigated for a long time by researchers from different areas of science, such as biology or physiology or neuroscience, psychology. And there is an intriguing research question about in this area how our senses can come together and create a perception, or how they affect each other when we think of perception of them. And we can look at multisensory integration in that for this. Multisensory integration is responsible for interaction and combination of cross-modal stimuli. A stimuli can combine from one sense can combine with the stimuli from the other sense, and they can change the strength of each other. They can increase and improve the perception of each other, or they can decrease their strength, or they can come together and create a unitary perception. I'm interested in tactile inputs in this study, so let's look at how tactile inputs interact with other senses. Imagine the texture perception. Texture perception is multisensory experience. For example, you touch a surface and you see the surface, and you touch the surface. There are two different inputs from two different senses, which are vision and um, tactile. And besides that, you can hear touch produce sound, and sound can combine with these senses and create a perception. Kant said that touch produce sound improves objects perception actually for texture perception. And Josmak and Harik conducted a research to look at how touch-produced sound affects texture perception, and they modify frequency and amplitude of touch-produced sound and presented with this sound with texture to their participants. And they saw that increasing frequency and amplitude cause heightened judgments for smoothness and dryness. Then Gestatal developed this research in 2002, and they investigate the effects of touch-produced sound on roughness perception of abrasive surface. There were two different surfaces which were presented to participants, one smoother and one rough comparatively, and they are asked to match. They're asked to choose smooth one or rough one while they are presented with auditory stimuli. And modifying frequencies, and high frequency sound causes the error for smooth surface and enhances the perceived roughness of it. Then I interested in harmonic and inharmonic sound in this study. So let's look at how the relationship of dissonance and roughness is. I want to start with that the features of low-level music and the features of senses has impact upon each other. There was a study which participants were presented with gustatory stimuli, which are sweet, sour, or bitter, and they are presented with auditory stimuli with higher pitch and lower pitch, and they're asked to match these. And they, in this result of the study, they found out that higher pitch is related to sweetness and sourness, while lower pitch is related to bitterness. Ramachandran and Hubbard used the synesthesia term to explain this experience actually. Synesthesia means that stimulation of one's senses and or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences on the second sensory or cognitive pathway. And Spence and Dero used the innate mechanisms to explain this experience. They say there are innate mechanisms in our brain, and congruency between the stimuli creates an experience and perception like this. And the last study that I want to mention was conducted by Liv et al. In 2017. And in this study, participants were presented auditory and visual stimuli. There were 8 different sound stimuli, and they wanted to rate different cross-modal dimensions such as texture, shape, and hardness. And in the result of this study, dissonance perception simplified visual modalities, and a cross-modal relationship was found between visual and auditory stimuli for especially texture and shape dimensions. I aim to explore how listening harmonic and inharmonic sounds affects our roughness perception. I hypothesize that participants will perceive the texture rougher when they listen to inharmonic music rather than the harmonic music. There are 17 subjects in my study, 10 male and 7 female, and their age range between 20 and 31. All subjects are right-handed, and they are asked to touch the texture by using their dominant hand and also bare finger. Some of the participants gave course credit, while some of the participants participated voluntarily, and they have no history for any auditory or tactile impairment. There were 3 complex harmonic sound and 3 complex inharmonic sound. I produced by using piano sound for these harmonics and inharmonics by using the voice Vista program. You can see the frequencies of harmonics and inharmonics here. And all of the auditory stimuli was presented by Sony headphone via Psychopy. And also there were 3 different sandpaper with different roughness level, which are soft, medium, and rough. A standing screen was used to prevent visual stimuli, and I want to make sure that subjects were presented only with auditory and tactile stimuli. In the procedure, participants touch the paper with and without sound condition. Every participant touch every paper with inharmonic sounds and harmonic sounds besides the no sound condition. There were total 21 trials, 9 harmonic, 9 inharmonic, and 3 no sound condition. They are asked to use their bare finger, and they're asked to move their finger left and right. And also I wanted them to keep their movements standard for every trial. And pseudo-randomized the order of the stimuli, the order of the presentation of stimuli was pseudo-randomized, and mirror was used to minimize habituation effects after every touch to the sandpaper, and they are asked to rate roughness level of the paper between 1 and 7, and as roughness will increase. I analyzed my result by using the last version of SPSS. My data was not normally distributed, so I used the Wilcoxon signed rank test to compare harmonic and inharmonics and no sound and sound condition. And result demonstrated that there is no statistically significant difference for roughness when combining harmonic sound and inharmonic sound. In this analysis, as I said, there were 3 different harmonic sound and 3 different harmonic sound, and I combined all the rates and created 1 harmonic and 1 inharmonic ratings and compared them, and there is no statistically significant difference. Besides that, I ran analyses for every harmonic and inharmonic sound levels and roughness levels, and I couldn't find any statistically significant difference between them. However, there is, I think, interesting result with this small sample. I found statistically significant difference between no sound condition and harmonics for smooth paper. they perceive, and you can see the means of harmonic and no sound condition. And I also found statistically significant difference between no sound and inharmonics for smooth paper again. So we can say that participants perceive the surface rougher when they receive no sound rather than they receive sound, and it doesn't matter sound harmonics or inharmonics. But I found this statistically significant difference for only smooth paper rather than medium or the rough one. Let's discuss the result and compare the other studies. Lederman conducted a study by using touch-produced sound and tactile stimuli, and she investigated how this affects our perception actually in 1970, and she couldn't find any statistically significant in her research. So she said that maybe auditory input is ignored when tactile input is available. Also, Suzuki et al. Found out that Suzuki et al. Conducted research which investigated vertical sound effects on tactile stimuli.
Didem, please wrap up in a couple of minutes.
Okay. Texture perception, and she found out that the results were very closer to each other. So maybe we can say that when tactile inputs available, participants maybe ignored the auditory one. And Lederman and Klasky designed another research, and they also, I think it is interesting result. They got strongest response for they use touch-produced sounds to investigate how its effects on roughness perception, and they got strongest response for unimodal haptic exploration for roughness perception, and the weakest one for the unimodal auditory condition. Actually, in this study, when the participants explored the roughness, they found it more rougher when they presented only tactile stimuli, as in my study. And they suggest that tactile and auditory inputs are combined, and estimated relative weighting derived from the data, 62% for touch and 38% for auditory. I think why these results like this is needed further investigation, because I found it only for smooth paper rather than the medium and rough one. And besides that, there was a limitation in my study. Yes, I want subjects to keep their moving standard, but I couldn't control it for every subject actually. So they touch the texture with different pressures. So maybe using electrotactile stimulation can have advantage, as Altınsoy said, because we can arrange the magnitude and also pulse frequency of our stimuli with different roughness. And there are a study, Cromet et al., which says that they conduct the research to investigate whether tactile frequency perception and auditory frequency perception process with same neural circuits, and they found out that yes, they are processed by same neural circuits. And maybe we can conduct this research by using electrotactile stimulation and arranging the frequencies of harmonics and the frequencies of tactile stimuli's roughness. Yes, my sample size was very small, so maybe we can I cannot find any statistically significant result because of that. And I want to say that tactile and auditory interaction is important. Explore this is important because it also uses in practical life, like for safe driving, as an example, as Stephen and Paul says, and also it is important for visual to develop some non-visual user interfaces for visually impaired people, as Pihon and Brewster say. Here is my references, and thanks for your listen. And your question also welcome.
Okay, thank you, Didem. Are there any questions from the audience? Didem, why do you think that the only significant result you found was regarding the smooth texture?
Hocam, I ran same analysis for the medium and rough one, and there is no statistically significant difference between them. But for the smooth and both for the inharmonic and harmonics, I found statistically significant difference between them. I think 1.5 point difference between
Why
them.
do you think that is? That's the question.
Actually, I'm not sure why I found it. I think it is needed further investigation because it's a I just wanted to, yes, there is a control I think no sound condition is a control condition. And I just wanted to run analysis between them, sound and no sound condition actually. It is like a inspiring.
Well, maybe when texture is rough, it's because it's inarguably rough. The secondary modal perception wouldn't affect our decision, but when there's more ambiguity, maybe the sound can, influence that. So to investigate that, you should maybe keep your roughness levels close to the smooth one next time. So you should test the different roughness levels around that hardness levels.
Actually, I couldn't find any statistically significant difference for rough paper because it is the roughest. So I thought that people already will give the 7 for this or the close.
Yeah, they wouldn't get fooled by the secondary perception, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Guess there are no other questions, so we can once again thank you, Didem. Then we can continue with Merve Ünlü's presentation, the role of working memory and future imagination.
I think you can see my screen now. Can you confirm it, please? Okay. So my paper is about the role of the working memory in future imagination. First, I'm gonna talk about the future thinking. What it is? The future thinking is the ability to imagine yourself in an expected future event, and requires recalling some past experiences, past events. Like we need to remember our semantic knowledge or some memories about the other people, the places, something like that. So approximately the adults thinks about the future 60 times during a day, which equates to one future thought in 16 minutes. So when we try to think about our future or organize a task that would possibly happen in near future, we may be occupied with future thinking. So let's say that we are planning to what we will do for dinner. This is the future thinking. You don't need to imagine the future like really far away from now on. So the researchers believe that the future thinking is playing crucial role in an individual's daily life, such as planning and decision making. So while we are remembering our past and traveling in the future, we tend to remember specific details such as locations, persons, objects, emotions, or thoughts while this event occurred. And some researchers shows that retrieving a past event and thinking about the future requires working memory to process and reorganize the information that had been recalled from long-term memory. So we need our working memory to imagine future and recall all these past events. So there is a high possibility that higher working memory and higher working memory capacity affects a person's attention, awareness, and sense of self into the future. So this is why we are looking at the relationship between working memory and the future imagination. So the previous research shows that the people actually suggest that people need a mental space, or you can say the mental stage for future thinking, and this space could be basic or complex. So imagine you're in a stage, you are putting the objects, places, persons to these stages, and imagining all these objects or the persons in different places. You're creating another, how can I say that, another possibility, actually. A person who thinks about the future requires to use your working memory capacity. So our working memory, actually our mental space or our mental stage. So I had two different hypotheses in this paper. So first one is the people with higher score on working memory task will have a higher number of future thoughts. The second one was the people with higher score on the working memory task will indicate more details such as location, people, maybe time, or the objects on their future tasks than the people who have a lower score on the task. So I did, it was a bit between subject design, so every participant attend only one condition. So there was a 30 participant between 18 and 35 years old. All the subjects were the undergraduate student, or at least they had a undergraduate degree. So all subjects attend an online computer-based true color test to decide if the subject has a high or low working memory capacity. So after each task, after this true color task, actually, they attend the 15 minutes future imagination part. So I'm going to talk about the Stroop test very briefly. I think everyone a little bit knows about it. They solved the color names with black font color and pushed the letter on the keyboard for the first part. But in the computer-based Stroop task, they solved the color names one by one. They solved the first one, pushed the ladder, and they saw the second color names, something like that, actually. They saw some shapes, the other names, and in the last phase, they pushed the letters for color that they saw on the screen, ignoring the words. I think that was the hardest part for this task. So after the Stroop task, they received a blank paper, or actually a Word document, a blank Word document to write their thoughts about the future. They were be given 15 minutes for this part and instructed about what they need to write during that time. So they were expected to write any future events would possibly happen in the future. So they were asked that what they will be doing next week, maybe next year, 10 years later, 50 years later, and be specific as much as they could do. So the future events that are imagined by subject scored according to their content. So if the future events, in the case any places, they get another score for that. So what did I find is actually one way Manova conducted to examine relationship between these Stroop scores and the future thoughts. And as you can see here, relationship between Stroop score and the future thoughts were statistically significant. So we don't know yet what kind of future thoughts were significant. I'm going to show it later. But there is a significant result that the Stroop score, I mean the working memory, has an effect on the future thoughts. So there was not a statistically significant relationship between the Stroop score and number of future thought as we expected. Actually, I expect to find a significant result between these two things, but the working memory has a statistically significant effect on details of people's future thoughts, specifically the place and the imagination. So the people with higher working memory capacity indicate more locations, like they start to say the future thoughts, like in 5 years later I'm in Istanbul, 10 years later I will be in United States, something like that. They start their future imagination with a place, with a location, or they really describe the things like they are living in that moment. But with lower working memory capacity, with people with a lower working memory capacity, they describe the future like a goal, like a wish list. Like, I want to do that in future. 5 years later, I wanna be graduated, something like that. So as you can see that, like I said before, the future thoughts indicates higher number of specific places if they have a higher score on working memory task. Also, the people who have a higher score on working memory task indicates more imagination in their future thoughts. So, like we discussed before, the previous researchers state that the people thinks one future task in 60 minutes. So maybe the time we're giving the subject to write their future tasks were limited, and we may find more details on future tasks if we would give them more time to write their future tasks. Also, the participants were college students or the people who has at least an undergraduate degrees. So Stroop scores of the participants were very close to each other. So we might find relationship between groups and numbers of future tasks if the gap would be greater between high and low working memory groups. So that was my paper. I think I was a little bit quick, but please share your questions or comments.
We like quick, Merve, don't worry. So any questions about the interesting findings?
I may have a question, actually.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry for being late, by the way. I apologize for missing the previous talks, but I had a class to attend. So nice presentation, Merve. Actually, it's a very interesting subject. I like the subject, the topic that you worked on. I think I have a question, maybe not a question, only a comment. How do you think that one could, or you could, in fact, if you're planning on elaborating on this project, how do you think that you could tease apart the role of working memory and long-term memory? I mean, how do you really know that these people actually had a better performance in terms of long-term memories?
It's another question.
I mean,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, again, because on the basis of what you have found, you're saying that this may have to do with the working memory. But it is possible that actually it has to do with the long-term memory as well. I'm not saying this is wrong or anything. In fact, there is, as far as I know, a relation between how good a working memory you have and how good a long-term memory you have. There seems to be a connection between the two as well, but I'm not sure if this is an absolute relation. It could be interesting to go into these details as well, I guess.
Yeah, actually, there is some researchers like fMRI studies about this. Like they're asking the recalling some past experiences, and also they want subject to write or think about the future, and all the links between this long-term memory and future thinking were very similar. So you are saying was right. The relationship between these two, like long-term memory and working memory and future imagination, really connect with each other.
Maybe one more comment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as I could remember, this is something that is probably more discussed under this topic of mental time travel.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, technically, this concept of a mental time travel is basically, formed on that idea that future imaginings or future thoughts or the kind of possible situations you can imagine yourself taking part in the future are very much processed the same way that you form memories. So I think this could be, it could be interesting to try to tie this project to what people do under this topic of mental time travel as well. It could be interesting.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense, what Serkan just suggested.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have any further intelligent comment. I would just I'm always curious to know what skills do I need to develop to be more creative. So if you find the answer, Merve, let me know. We can develop an app for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alper, you can go ahead and start your presentation if you're ready.
Sure, and finally at last somebody's discussing something and people all look very, very much relaxed right now, so it's a good fortune to be the final presenter. So I think you all see my screen and an AccuCube that I present. Anyone experienced visual perception? Perceptual switch, that will I call. So if you just switch your fixations between those two circles, you're going to experience it directly. So this was put by the early literature contributors into bistable perception. So actually, this might also be called the low-level perceptual illusion. And let's get to the next one. I mean, this is a little bit, this actually takes time to experience it. Anyone sees it, please raise hand by using the click on the right bottom. No one sees it. Let me clear it up. This is the chin of a young lady, and this is the nose and eyebrows. This is the ear of her. So it takes time, but actually this was also put in very early times of the literature, but for a very long time, nobody discussed about what might be different between the Necker cube and the wife mother-in-law illusion. So actually, but what this was why this was put into the literature, that it showed that there might be some top-down and bottom-up processes taking place at the same time while we perceive such illusions, because by our nature we are in an urgent need to fixate our perceptions. In nature, we don't have these illusions. We don't have such illusory visual percepts. By the way, let me clear it out that this is a study on the auditory bistable effect. So Chastain and Burnham and Garcia and Perez tried to instruct people to change their perception, visual perception, between those two interpretations. Actually, I will call for each one, the wife and mother-in-law, the old lady and the young lady, an interpretation, and each switch between those interpretations, these interpretations, I will call them the perceptual switch during the discussion that I'm presenting. So my main actually focus has been the auditory perceptual bistable percepts. Actually, this one is a little bit neglected in the literature. Nobody tried to understand the auditory bistable effects. At least some of them who tried to give examples of it used auditory streaming studies, which are like, let me imitate it, beep beeps and nothing more, which is quite a low level input to create an bistable percept. So it changes like beep 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 beep, so you hear a b a b a b, and this is quite low level. So what I for some reason I've been into this literature since the beginning of the last summer, and I try to use very different methodologies on it, and the methodology is quite limited in auditory perception, because you have to trust the reports of your subjects. But until 2012, nobody tried to understand the higher level effects of these bistable percepts. And Hizao actually used a paradigm to actually an experiment setting, which is audiovisual. And they presented this wife and mother-in-law illusion, and there was a woman speaking on their headphones, and if the this is interesting, if the speaker on the headphone is a young lady's voice, they saw the young lady more frequently. Actually, what they show, I mean, there is, of course, in the literature they say involuntary changes takes place, so it's not important to measure all those switches. But also they show that attentional processes take place in actually interpreting all these visual images. So I think Burak tried to make us listen to one of his audio input, but I hope you are going to hear this. This is an example of audio-visual bistable percept. Do you hear that? No, okay. I will just imitate it too. It is like kaban, 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 kaban. So there are two percepts, one banka and the other is kaban. And Presnitzer, which was a review, actually commented on that. This guy here actually commented on that. The lower level percepts do not intercept with each other. So meaning that when I present them a visual illusory percept and an audio bistable percept, it is not going to intercept with each other. So that's interesting. And Hube actually tried this, and they simultaneously presented their subjects a lower level visual interception bistable percept, which is, for example, an echo tube, and presented a audio bistable percept, and they tried to find a correlation between them, but they couldn't find it. They concluded that they do not intercept with each other until it becomes a higher level percept. So I will get to actually after the when we get to 21st century, the literature was quite on the same ground that it is a process in which both high and low level processes taking place. So think of that when I present them a banka, which is a lower level stimuli at the bottom of the screen, it is going to activate both of the percepts, which is one banka and kaban. So temporarily, do not take it as physically overlapping with each other, but temporarily, one is actually overlapping the other interpretation, so leaving very little to go. I mean, there is too little difference between them, because the lower level stimulus remains the same. There is no change in it. So we go up and down and go up and down, and they have to in a competition with each other to be fixed. Actually, at this point, logothetes, when we get to 21st century, Leopold and Logothetes discussed that it is an exploratory behavior where the brain is in need of a fixation on a percept, because it is it's a quite a need for a survival mechanism. You have to fixate and you have to be sure what you see, what you hear. So the brain starts an exploratory behavior. The activation spreads among the possible interpretations. And if there is no absence, if there is no further stimulus in the environment, as opposite remember the Hizao experiment, he presented a young woman's voice, and people saw the young lady more frequently, and the duration was longer. So actually, what motivated me into study this, the classical Sweeney experiment. Sweeney used a lexical decision task in a semantic priming paradigm, and he showed that when you see a word in an ambiguous position, the other interpretations of that word is going to be kept active during that process. He used the priming effect, which is not conceptually relevant, but still it activates the other interpretations. So there has to be, as Leopold and Logothetes and Sweeney said, there has to be an activation spreading from one to the other, because the perceptual switches has to occur involuntarily, and the attention has the control of it, as we saw here. So I hypothesized that indeed. So if I give them a facilitating image, because I know that both modality are independent within itself until it reaches a high level structure. So if I facilitate one interpretation over the other, is it going to be kept active for longer? I mean, I wanted them to press a button on the keyboard when they hear, for example, banka and kaban. I wanted them to say that, okay, if you hear kaban, just press it and do not press it again until you hear banka back again. So I presented them the facilitating images, and to check that actually, so I needed a duration of fixations between those interpretations. And the perceptual switches actually would occur in the semantically presented, I mean, which is semantically relevant to perceptual images that I give, semantically relevant. So it has to slow down the process of switches. You have to fixate on each one for longer because the activation is taken in a bigger area. This is all hypothetical, by the way. Do not take it as reality, but the activation has to take it in a bigger area on higher levels, in a semantic or conceptual level. So I also tried to test, actually, the hypothesis of Hughes, who says they do not intercept with each other, I mean, the low level. So I wanted to find a cross-modal effect on each one. So I presented actually some visually strong stimulus, lower level stimulus, which has not, which does not include any semantic interpretation. So these percepts, these visual percepts, has this after effect, and I want it to be strong so that it can have effect on auditory perception on lower levels. And actually, which I wasn't expecting to get a result, but I think I find a trend. I also wanted to use incongruent semantic pictures, which is not relevant to the percepts, the interpretation of those percepts when they hear the bistable auditory inputs. I wanted to use those incongruent, which is not relevant to banka or kaban, but I wanted to see the effect of it as well. So there were 4 trials for recordings of sounds, and each one was 2 minutes. Actually, it's still disturbing for people. It was still disturbing for people because when you hear, some of you smile there, when you hear constantly the same thing, it's getting disturbing and disturbing as the time passes. And so left and right arrow keys were used, and I used Psych Toolbox on MATLAB. I also found effect of fixation differences. If you use saccades, it's going to change your perception. So I wanted each of my subjects to fixate their eyes on the fixation cross, not to move it. So it's a sort of a task, and it also prevents them using attentional control on the percepts. So each 2 minutes in trials, the first 60 seconds was spontaneous process. I mean, I wanted to get a mean of their interpretations for each percept. And the next 30 seconds, I gave the incongruent visual with one. The 3 of them were actually the ones that with after effect, and one was semantically incongruent to hand, as you see there. So the last 30 seconds was the in which I tried to facilitate one over the others. Actually, the results were interesting, as I expected. Of course, the semantically facilitated one stayed longer in fixation. People told that they hear that word for a longer period of time compared to other interpretation. And I also did some sort of a grouping comparison. I compare the first 60 seconds to the last 30 seconds so that I can see if it slows down the switching process. I mean, does it affect the switch duration? People say, okay, I switched it more frequently or less. And of course, there was a significant difference as well. People switched their interpretations less frequently on the last 30 seconds when semantically congruent percept were represented. And the last one gave no significant result consecutively. So the duration of stability in the first and the second 30 seconds, where I give where I give strong visuals with After Effects, gave no results. There was a trend, of course, but gave no results. But what is interesting, when I compare the incongruent stimulus with the ones with After Effects, I saw that they still experience less switches between them. So even if I gave them semantically incongruent stimuli, they still experienced an exploratory behavior on higher levels, and they try to fixate, and maybe they try to find what is relevant in this picture to the auditory stimulus that I hear. But it still had an effect, not significant, but so as you all know, we were having challenges in finding subjects for in this pandemic. So I hope when I find more and more people to attend my experiment, I think this might turn into a significant result, but I don't know. I will try it. I will keep gathering data. So finally, I mean, to discuss this, I mean, after Leopold and Logofes's paper, the main focus of the literature was on the levels of processing which real competition takes place. I mean, is it fully semantic, conceptual level competition between two percepts? Or is it full lower level, as early literature says? So I think my study also supported Hube's position that two lower levels do not intercept with each other. And I think it also supports that the main competition level is the higher levels on bistable percepts. I hope this is all clear for you. I will be very happy to discuss this.
Okay, thank you very much, Alper. We see that a lot of thought went into the study. Are you done? I hope.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Are there any questions?
I think I do.
Great.
So when you actually say bistable percepts,
Yep.
You're not necessarily talking about two different types of percepts that are similar in nature entirely. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that, for example, when you have that illusion, the young girl and the witch, as I knew it, you said mother-in-law, being much more politically correct.
Maybe he doesn't like his mother-in-law.
So that one, for example. Yeah. So the point here is that, that's an interesting one, because with the other, for example, I'm not having any problems with the Necker cube. I've never had any problems with Necker cube. Even when I was told that there's an illusion here, I knew that there was an illusion. But with this one, for example, I'm having a very hard time every time I'm sticking to the young girl image, and I'm not having the other one at all, unless I'm pointed out, I'm actually directed towards the other interpretation.
Yeah, you need a bias.
Yes. But and this in fact is, I'm not saying it's not an illusion, but it's a kind of illusion that is very different from the other bistable percept, which actually only comes about when you repeat something, for enough times. Otherwise, it doesn't, right? I mean, when you say banca, 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 so that has to be some time, there has to be some repetitions for it to come about, right? I mean, I think I understand why you're saying bistable percepts, or why other people would call them that way. But I think I'm just speculating, but I think it would be more appropriate to find similar types of bistable percepts to actually compare them. I think these two are of different types.
Okay, yeah, I was expecting such a question.
I'm not sure if this makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I agree with you in that. I mean, the auditory stimuli has to activate and has to be very much powerful compared to the visual one, because it has to activate the linguistic structures as well. I agree with that. But I was expecting such a question, so I put this one. Indeed. This one is a very much simpler one compared to this one. It takes, yeah, I agree that it takes very long time to start seeing the young lady. I agree with that. But this one is inevitably leads to perception in faces and the face. And actually, these studies, Loomer, Tong, Hasson, et al., all show that they studied an fMRI study on the face illusion, and they show different region activations for each interpretation of those. So, they actually show us the higher level interpretation and its competition between each other. But why I did it on auditory percepts, it wasn't done. I mean, I couldn't find any study on the auditory perception. And as Presnitzer here foreseen, yes, it has some mutual structures, mutual levels of common mechanisms on the perception. Yeah, but I agree with you that auditory stimulus has to activate bigger structures or bigger areas in bistable percepts. I agree with that, but what I want to show that they meet at a higher level. Where they meet is on a higher level structure, conceptual level.
I understand what you're saying, and but there is actually another way of interpreting this as well. For example, with what happens with the linguistic one is that you're basically repeating the same word, and obviously, there's a possibility that in that one, the first syllable and the second syllable can actually be interpreted as the first after some time.
It does.
So, but what happens is that you actually get, exposed to it repeatedly, right? So this one here is different. I think it could be interesting to actually present it the way the linguistic material is presented. Like, for example, you see the picture and you don't see the picture, and you see the picture and you don't see the picture, right? I mean, I think because it is that way, right? I mean, you see kaban, and if you say kaban, it doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, you don't get the same kind of result when you get kaban, 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 kaban. But if there is enough time in between, if you let the neurons to breathe, then they don't do it. They don't go into that.
So I actually designed all the sounds in according to the literature, and I really hope I wish you could hear the sound on this page. It is quite it's quite quick, fast. It is kaban, 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 kaban. It is so fast, and after hearing it 2 or 3 times, you can't really switch off the other syllable. I mean, you hear banka, but ban, but you cannot switch off the ka. It has to be some sort of parallel processing, and there is actually in the literature a term called verbal transformation effect. To avoid this, I use 2 keys and try to bias them into each interpretation, because in verbal transformation effect, people say, okay, I hear at the beginning, I hear banka, 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 kaban and banka, but people say I hear, for example, vale. It might change their perception, and at least up to 8 people say that I hear 8 different words in five minutes. So yeah, you're right, but I had to bias them onto the interpretation of each one. So you are going to hear banka and kaban, nothing else.
Well, actually, what psychologist says is, the consistent conflict between the nature of two senses, because audition is temporary, visual stay, but actually, so here you're using an auditory file which continues, and the images you show only flashes for a moment, and then they're supposed to be gone. But they're only not gone if the image has an after effect. So I was thinking maybe you accidentally already applied what he just suggested by, these, can you come to that flashy contrast image? Yeah, so this was shown for a moment. If we focus enough just for 2 seconds, even after it's gone, it still stays with us. So maybe that could it be thought as the correspondent of a continuous auditory signal? Otherwise, it has to be a video, which is still doable, but it will be something else because motion is also processed by a very large network in the brain. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just expecting to find a strong lower level visual